once again to the bleak and post-apocalyptic Comic Vault. I am Captain Logan, and joining me for the first time in the Comic Vault, it's Conner Nielsen. Hi, Conner.
Hi, how's it going, everybody?
How's it going, man? Conner just recently got to third place on Who Reviews the Reviewers. Congratulations, Conner.
Thank you very much.
For being the third place winner of this year's Who Reviews the Reviewers. And I decided to bring Conner on to talk about a book that... Now, Conner, is this your first time reading this, or had you read this before? And okay, cool. So I was telling Conner that I was going to work on this. We were chatting back and forth a little bit, and that this was one of the next things I was going to do. And he's like, ooh, I've been meaning to read that. And I was like, cool, well, let's talk about it together. So today, we are finally getting into Why the Last Man. This is the first volume of Why the Last Man. I have the hardcover edition. Conner is holding the paperback version, and there are 5 volumes of this. We're going to go through each of them, and we're just going to do one of these a video. And I was given this a good long time ago now by Dan's News. And thanks again, Dan, and sorry it's taking me this long to finally get to this. It's been a couple of years now. Finally getting to Why the Last Man. And real quick, I got to tell this story because this is a thing that I actually read this before, and I'm anchoring to finally get to the second volume because I enjoyed it so much the first time around, and I mean, like, this is just one of those really immersive experiences where I forget I'm reading a book. It's kind of like watching a movie. Like it's quite the page turner, and I get to the end of it, and I'm like, oh, now I gotta review it. I kind of want to just read the next part. And I realized that the last time I read this, I had exactly that experience with it. And it's been like 3 years, or no, 5 now. And I didn't do it then either. I got to tell this story real quick. So what happened, what happened several years ago was we were doing those panels on Eric's channel. I don't know if you know about these crazy, Conner, these crazy legendary Batman panels that we did, which is How I Met Manos in the first place. And we had King, and we had, and King is a huge Vaughn fan. We had King sent me the first couple issues of Saga when that first came out. And we had, who else was there with us? It was me. I guess it was me, Manos, Eric, and King. That was the 4. And we did a couple of these big Batman panels. And there was a panel we were going to do after that never ended up happening, where each of us was supposed to pick a comic series that none of the others of us had read. And King picked Y, and I read it for that, and then that panel never happened. And I never ended up moving on. So five years later, I'm finally reading this. I cracked this open and went, this was published in 2002? I did not realize that this was even as old as it is. And the first comment I want to make about this as we go ahead and jump into it, Conner, is that I feel like this thing holds up really, really well. It doesn't feel like a dated thing at all, and that somewhat depresses me because it is such a political piece. I'm going through this and I'm like, many of the political and social and cultural issues that are here are just as prevalent now as they were back then. Everybody's saying all the same stuff. The world here feels as polarized as people talk about it feeling now, and it's been a lot of years, and I was really kind of surprised. But I feel like, with the exception of some technology things and some cultural references and things, Conner, that you could put this on the stands right now for the first time and nobody would know the difference.
I agree, because one of the things that happened when I picked this up was, this is actually, in terms of my history, I have friends who have just been telling me, you have to read why, you have to read why, you have to read why. I'm like, okay, in terms of Vaughn...
So the correct response is, why?
Why? Man! So, and, you know, it was one of those things I never really had interest in because I'm not a big fan of post-apocalyptic stuff. It's become very oversaturated. And you kind of have to understand, this was kind of before it was that oversaturated.
This is pre-Walking Dead.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it really holds up. There are certain things that definitely feel its era, like especially the first in terms of comics, because if I hadn't known any better, the first 5 issues could have been a Brian Michael Bendis, Mark Bagley series. Like it was like a little decompressed, very dialogue driven. The dialogue's really good. The art kind of looks like Mark Bagley, and so it kind of has that like Ultimate Spider-Man feel to it, even though it's not a superhero book. But then but at the same time, it's when you talk about the political stuff and how politically charged it is, it's kind of a bit of a thing about our society when we're just as polarized now as when we were when 2002 was around.
Yeah, I'm just saying I felt a little bit depressed reading it, where I was like, we're dealing with all the same things. What I really appreciated about because of course this is a complete, a social commentary, and obviously there's quite a bit of satire. As soon as you get to the moment where no worse Republicans, But what I really like about it, in terms of the politics, is that I feel like it plays both sides pretty well.
Yeah.
It's I mean it is. I feel like reading it, and this is not a problem for me. I feel like reading it. I think I kind of get a sense of what Vaughn's politics themselves might be, but it doesn't matter because at the same time he's showing you the absurdity of both sides of arguments, and. You've got because I mean like he has crazy extremists on both sides of everything, and I really like that about it. So at the same time as he's got these really kind of nutso the Republicans, he's also got the extreme craziest end of feminism, and like these are, by the way, these are not the sorts of issues that I generally talk about on the channel. I'm not a political guy. I don't talk about politics, but this is a book about those things, so I have to talk about them in the context of this book. And I appreciated that I didn't feel like it was for one group of people.
Right. For me, that Democrat, that Republicans thing, and this is kind of one of those things, because like if you're gonna, I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on, if you're gonna like take hits against one side, you better expect some hits against your side. So like one of those things, there's like that whole thing where it's like, what are those, terrorists? No, worse, Republicans. And then the next line is even like also a funny like backhanded sort of joke where it's like, oh please, not everyone who carries guns are Republicans. And so
yeah, you just immediately you see both sides of a thing, and I appreciated that a lot. It made it a lot more stomachable because I didn't feel like I was being preached at.
Yeah, and there was this one, it kind of reminded me of this Bob Hope joke from a really old zombie movie. It was like, what's a zombie? Well, they're these awful, horrible things. They just do everything. They're mindless. They just do everything that's being told to them without thinking or feeling. You mean like Democrats? And it kind of reminded me of that same thing of that kind of slamming one side of the political aisle. But at the same time, you are right. It is very fair, and it doesn't feel like I'm being preached at. One of those things that I liked was we meet the extremist Republicans, but then we meet the new president of the United States, who is the Secretary of Agriculture, and she's also a Republican. She's like, what's the matter with you people? You're giving us a bad rap. And so, and I like that. It reminded me of Vaughn's other work called Ex Machina, which, if you've read any of that, what happens is the mayor of New York City, he is a very left-leaning Democrat, and then but the commissioner of police is very, very Republican, and they have that political divide against them, but they both very, very respect one another because they get their jobs done in an efficient manner. That's why they keep each other around. So I really appreciate that balance.
I feel like Vaughn created a premise here where not only is he able to deal with every single hot button issue imaginable, but you about have to if you're really going to delve into it and explore it. I feel like this is a series that, told a different way, could easily have been a 6-issue miniseries. What we have here is not just a simple character study in the midst of a thing, but we're pulling out and seeing the whole scope of it. So we're dealing primarily with the last man, the kid and his monkey, but there's this large supporting cast, and we're following the subplots. We're following multiple people at once, and so he's wanting to create this big, vast scope. The fact that it's taken this long for anybody to option this thing is remarkable to me, by the way, because it's that kind of big scope. You want to see this. I want to see on the big screen. You want to see this as a TV series. It's kind of the only way to really do it right, I think. But anyway, so he's tackling all those different issues and in an incredibly thoughtful way. People look at this and call it realistic, and I think in a lot of ways it is. But what I appreciate more about it is that he's just thinking. If you took every man out of the equation all at one time, what would happen? And you don't have to draw these big, wide, sweeping conclusions about like why so many men happen to a certain job over women. It's simply that's how things are. And so when they disappear, what happens? I like the line about how we're using trains now instead of airplanes because there's hardly any female pilots, and that's true. There aren't a lot of women that do that job, and so all that's really interesting, and I feel like this has got to be a thing that's tackled now in gender studies classes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It's got to be.
I also, one of those things that's like all these characters are still people, and they're not just they're not mouthpieces for their own like opinions and political views and all that stuff. Like there's a part like at the beginning where Yorick's mom is saying how she's not going to support abortion, and then the congressman says, what kind of a woman are you? And she says the same kind of woman you are, a Democrat. But he's like, but you're siding on the GOP with this? And she says, yeah, the same way you do with gun control, like 87% of the time. And
it's just more complex that people are complex and come to things because of different backgrounds and different experiences, and if you just assume that everyone is going to be straight up down one side or the other on anything, that's very naive, and it oversimplifies things because people come to different opinions based on a lot of stuff, and I just really appreciate that that's there. I also thought it was really interesting that he took, because I feel like the way he handles the way women act with no men around is not necessarily the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I want to throw that out. This is certainly one person's interpretation of what that would be like. But a lot of it, again, does feel fairly believable and fairly realistic. But I thought it was really interesting that that there's some talk, and I think he is, probably right about this. There's some talk about how, like, just because all the men are gone doesn't mean that there isn't still going to be, like, a lot of some racism against blacks in the South.
Absolutely.
Stuff like that. I just say, he tackles every single little thing imaginable. I thought that stuff was fascinating.
Yeah. So when it comes to the structure of this book, I almost see it in three different ways. There's the first issue, which is kind of like the prologue, and then there's the rest of that first story arc, Unmanned, and then there's the second story arc where they're on the train and then they go to that little town.
Right.
When it comes to that first issue, I haven't read something that good in a long time. And the thing is, like, it manages to build tension, have suspense, a looming threat. It has a magnificent opening contract of just all the men are dead, and she has the gun in her head, and then it cuts back, and you're like, oh my gosh, huh? And it has this eerie, ominous tone. And then what happens is it builds up, but it's also not just building up to this big event. It's giving us a commentary on male privilege at the same time. How we have all these very, very exceptional women, like there's a congresswoman, but she's still answering, she's still like below that congressman at the same time when they're talking, because she makes a remark of, when is a congressman going to the lowly house? Why are you visiting the lowly House of Representatives? And then we have Alter, who's a very fascinating character to me, because she talks about how...
Yeah, it's not real developed yet. I mean, they're keeping her he's keeping her really mysterious up front.
Exactly, but the implications of what she's doing, especially during that interview when she's talking about how she's worked hard and she comes from this line of women who are very, very militant, and they are very good at what they do in terms of fighting, and they're warriors. And but at the same time, there's that sense of she's just kind of a subject for men to, like, those men who are interviewing her. She's kind of a subject to them, and she's not being respected by the higher officials. She doesn't feel she's being respected because she's just dealing with rock throwers. So there's that kind of interesting thing, and then there's Yorick, who isn't a very exceptional person, but he's the most important person in the world because he's the last man. And so I think there's a really interesting commentary on male privilege there, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like I'm being preached at. It's simply like that's kind of symptomatic of this world that is happening.
Yeah, and it's in this. I think it's really interesting that it's published when it is, that it's right after the turn of this century, because you're in this really weird transition period where you still have some of those problems, but then we have to some degree solved some of that too, of course. And so, I mean, you have plenty of women in this that were already in high positions, but there were and you know, that run their own companies and all kinds of things. But then but then you just have, like I said, whole pockets of careers that a lot of women just, for whatever reason, don't happen to enter into, and so when you step back and you look at it simply as people and not men and women, just this kind of thing would inevitably happen if you lost half your population. Just like take any random half of your population and how much of your infrastructure goes with it. But then, of course, you know, it being men, there are certain things that people simply can't do. Because the first thing I thought of was, I was like, well, if half the people left, then there would be like more stuff for the fewer people that were there. But then you have to keep. But then I kept having to remind myself, oh yeah, but then how do you deal with food and stuff? Because you didn't just lose all the male humans, you lost all the male everything. So that's what makes it post-apocalyptic. I think that if you only lost the male humans, but all the livestock and everything stuck around, it wouldn't be nearly as big of a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the urgency that much better from a narrative standpoint.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a ticking clock, and you don't know when that clock's going to strike midnight, because you're like, it could happen, you know, someone could just go around and kill all the cows. There could be a disease that kills all the cows. You know, all the cows get old. Like, it's something like there's a sense of like fear of like what's gonna happen, like, and how soon can we get this problem solved, if at all.
If at all, yeah. And the only person that has any sense of what to do about it is the person that allegedly caused the problem in the first place. Right. And so it is really horrifying when her lab goes up.
Yeah.
Because she says, well, yeah, I've got some of the research, but if I just start working on this cloning operation again, I could kill all the women now. Like the same thing that happened before. That was an interesting looming mystery at the beginning, because I kept asking myself, why in the world would this woman impregnate herself with her own clone, and what does that mean exactly, and what is it she's doing? And then later on, when she finally explains it, you know, it makes perfect sense, and the idea is that she was. If you haven't read this in a while, the idea is that she had a family member. I can't remember if it was a niece or what it was, but she had a family member who needed a bone marrow transplant, and there was no good donor. So she decided to clone herself, and then maybe it was a clone of the niece, I forget, and then take that clone and do a bone marrow. We've seen a lot of science fiction that's done this very thing, and so what we've got, of course, is that classic idea of doing this like new science that we're not really sure that we know what we're doing with it, right? And then it you know, for the right reasons, and then accidentally ruining ourselves over it. I was talking about how this book pretty much would read the same way if it was written now. That's maybe one of those things that does date it a little bit, is that cloning was still a big thing we were talking about right then.
Yeah. That's one of those things, though. It's like, I don't know if she's the one who caused it, because it's weird to me. I know it's science fiction, but it's like, I gave birth to this thing, and then all of a sudden every man died. It's like, well, what's the connection between this clone and then every man? And
well,
her name is Man, but
Yeah, and that's clearly on purpose. I feel like that, and keep in mind, of course, that we're reviewing this having not read anything after it yet. So if you're familiar with all this stuff and you know what happens next, first of all, do us a favor and don't spoil it for us in the comments. Just do us a favor and don't do that. Secondly, we are intentionally reviewing it this way, where we don't know what's coming next and we get to be excited about it. That's always a fun way to do these, I think. So anyway, I think that's being played as a question if she's right about it or not. She thinks she caused it, but that could be an unreliable thing. We don't know. But also remember that there was that she mentioned that there was an epidemic that it caused. But why did they all die all at one time is the question. Like I guess she created some sort of a virus.
Yeah. And that's also another thing.
But something is not adding up there, and I think that's got to be on purpose. So we'll see.
The same reason why like Yorick and Ampersand are still alive. It's like, oh, it's a magic ring. I'm like, I don't buy that. I mean, unless we get like at least a more solid explanation, because it's just kind of brought up as it's a magic ring. No, there has to be another reason. Like he was.
Oh no, absolutely, and I think that's got to be part of Yorick's like detached worldview where he doesn't see the world the way it really is, and that I get the sense it's weird reviewing a thing like this when we don't have the whole story in front of us. We're looking at a fifth of it, but with just what we have so far, especially with kind of the big climax at the end of this particular part of the story when we get to the end of this trade, there's this big thing that comes to a head where you've got the you've got Yorick who has no idea what the world is really like, and that argument with his sister, which I really, really appreciated, where we finally get the sense of, oh, he's not really experienced much life.
Yeah, and it's all set up very well with his talking to Beth, because he mentions how he's kind of become agoraphobic, like he's scared of the outside world. He doesn't want to get out, and
oh, thanks for reminding me about that. I forgot about that exchange. Yeah. That's really important.
And by the way, that phone call is great. So one of those things, we're introduced to Yorick, and I think this is a pretty important thing that they do visually. Everyone we meet beforehand is man. No, is a woman. And the first man we meet is Yorick, and he's upside down. He's out of place. And then the first time we actually see him right side up is when the camera or the panel and the artist is upside down with him, and then he gets back down and he kind of starts to become more honest with his girlfriend. But that still visually sets up this man is out of place. He's different.
Yeah, no, that's a really good call, and sort of foreshadows what's about to happen to everybody. That he's gonna be a man out of place from now on. After that, and so I think the most gripping part of the entire section or the entire trait for me is when his sister shows up at the end.
So
that gets crazy. Now I'm very interested to get more of an understanding as we move along as to why exactly she felt the need to go that far. I think we're getting kind of inklings of it.
Right. Before that, though, should we just like go on into the last bit, or do you want to talk about the middle segment before they go there?
No, that's fine. We can jump around a little bit. It's really cool.
All right. So when what I really liked about that thing with his sister is that the first time they're actually sharing a panel together is they're trying to hurt each other. And they're very angry at each other. He's aiming a gun at her. And beforehand, the only thing they were actually going after were the ideas of each other. They had this idea of what the other person was and their expectations. And now that she's very different and he's kind of acting a little stupid in that town, it's a very compelling argument that's drawn, because he acts smart, but he's not really smart, and she's kind of become more aware of the world around her. And I think this is also indicative of the names they're given, Hero and Yorick. I actually did some research, and Hero is, of course, a Shakespeare character from Much Ado About Nothing, and she is a foil for Beatrice, and so she's basically there to kind of help her support the character. And she's also there to bring something out of Yorick in here, but she's also in that time in Much Ado About Nothing, a character who's meant to kind of represent the culture she's in. And I think now she was in, I think it's very fitting though that when she was in that man-dominated society, they make a comment that she sleeps with a lot of them. She's very much a woman in a man's world, and now that she's in a woman's world, she's very indicative of that. She's all, especially with the Amazons, she's very militant.
Yeah, and immediately buys into whatever the rhetoric is. I mean, I think it's important to note that both of them are out of touch in different ways, and each of them has something the other one desperately needs. So Yorick is book smart, and she is sort of kind of street smart, but she doesn't have the other side of that, which is the ability to analyze and make and draw conclusions and make choices for herself. So she just buys into, like I said, the rhetoric of the Amazons, which, once again, if you haven't read this, or you haven't read it in a while, we've got, like I said, kind of the furthest extreme end of a feminist philosophy, which is they think that this was supposed to happen, and that women are supposed to completely dominate the earth, and that I guess they just have to figure out some other way to procreate. And they're just absolutely horrifying. It's also important to mention, because we haven't talked about this at all, that this is a book that, of course, has a lot of language and gets pretty vulgar, and it warrants it. And
it never felt gratuitous.
No, definitely not. I mean, there's a lot of F-bombs and stuff, but I'm okay with it. It fits this material.
And they use the C-bomb, and they make it, and they actually use that word and have such a philosophical discussion about it that I never even considered, and it's very indicative of Victoria's philosophy that was so compelling, I wanted to hate men. Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's and then what's really dangerous about it, of course, is that it's still absolutely insane.
Yeah.
You know, and then you step back for a minute, and that's what the sister can't do, is step back. But yeah, so yeah, that part, yeah, the C word thing, that was like one of the most fascinating things in the entire book, I thought. And that's also talking a little bit about how kind of uncultured Americans are, and how we don't really a lot of people in this country, at least I think that you know that's speaking to maybe don't know as much about the world as they think they do, or about history and those sorts of things, that we're not quite as educated or enlightened as we'd like to pretend we are. There's some discussion about ignorance there, and it's interesting the different people that those factoids come from. There's so much research in this book, or maybe Vaughn just knows everything, where you get Yorick, who knows a lot but doesn't understand a lot.
Yeah, that's a good way.
And then you have somebody like the kind of the Amazon queen, whatever her name is, because I don't remember, who also knows a whole lot, but has found a way to like spin things, and she's got this interpretation that just kind of fits the worldview that she wants to perpetuate. Something happened to that lady.
Yeah.
That just put her on this complete nutso crazy path, because like some of the things she says make a lot of sense. Like you said, she starts getting really compelling, and then you start. And I don't want to get crass and crude and talk about that. This is a hard thing to talk about on my channel, but then you get toward the end of it, and it starts getting crazy town when she starts talking about male genitalia and stuff.
Yeah, no, that was one thing that I was very interested in, because they
I'm sorry, they what now?
Yeah, so
ha! No, Connor, I had that experience 3 or 4 times reading this. Ha!
So, I mean, they really dig into the discussion of derogatory, terms for female genitalia, but no one ever is referring to male genitalia, in a derogatory sense. It's almost like there's a worship of, so
there's a phallic symbol thing, yeah. Well, and I thought it was really interesting when you. Sorry, what's that?
The Washington Monument, they're all like mourning, and it's almost like they're worshiping this giant erect thing, and then
again, everybody but the Amazons.
Everyone but the Amazons, and then at the same time, she started talking about how like she has such like a Greek mythology kind of outlook on everything. Like waste and seed come from the same hole on the anatomy.
I wasn't going to actually quote it, but sure.
And so it was like, therefore it's poison. And so when you kind of combine that with her discussion of, the female genitalia, she talks about how man has not only poisoned, the race, it's poisoned language. It has ruined, and through language, society. And so why is America and why is the world so ignorant? And it's, from her philosophy, man poisoned it. And it makes sense from where she's coming from.
It makes sense to a degree until you realize that, and I think a lot of the point of, at least the beginning of this, is that at the end of the day, we're all human.
Yeah, and I love that. It's not. I mean, there's gender politics here. There's political stuff. There's all this kind of stuff. But at the end of it,
but I mean, this with the women, it runs the gambit of exactly all of the ideas, philosophies, emotions, etc., that you would have if this was flipped.
Yeah.
You have the pacifists, you have the military, you have the politicians, you have everything you would have if it was just men. The human condition is not any different just because it's women, and that's I love that about it.
It's a story about humanity. I really, really appreciate that, because I think what happens is when people, again, when they have like a political agenda, you're trying to generalize things, and nothing's generalized. It's like in every culture there's subcultures, and there's subcultures of subcultures, and there's different thought processes, and there's so many different experiences everyone has, and I loved that. It was such a human story.
There are very, very few people that could pull this off and it not look juvenile.
Exactly. And you know what? When I was doing my research, I was looking at story arcs, and it's like, oh, the second story arc is called Cycles. How cute. One of the story arcs is called Girl on Girl. How cute. Oh, wow, this is going to be juvenile. That was my thought process going in, and look how ignorant I am. So...
yeah, because it ain't that at all.
It's not.
I want to... Sorry, if you don't mind. Let's back off for a second and just talk about this as a comic book, because I think it's a really interesting medium for this. Because it's not the most visual thing ever, right? Like this could easily have been a novel.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like easily. And I want to ask you, why do you think, besides the fact that just Vaughn likes to write comics, why is this a comic book and not a novel?
Honestly...
Or a series of novels?
Yeah, I gotta go straight to the art. The art adds something, especially to me in that
I'm not saying it isn't. I wanted to set you up because I know you want to talk about the art. You see what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there. My big thing is I love art. That's the reason I read comics. I love the art. So, and of course for the writing too. But for me, the artist is kind of like Pia Guerra. I love this guy. He's great, and I think the coloring in this comic is essential, especially during that confrontation between Hero and Yorick at the end. The sun is setting, and that adds something visually that I don't think any prose or any words could have ever communicated better, because it's like, yeah, I mean, you can say, oh yeah, it's the sun setting on the on their ideas of one another. The sun is setting. Now they're in this night.
You almost in prose have to spell it out to a point where I don't even get to fill in the blanks anymore, right?
Exactly.
You just wouldn't even appreciate it. And if you shot it in film, you'd have to get it on Magic Hour, and that's hard.
Absolutely. And so at the same time, the art's really pretty too. But then there's that part where 355 is cutting Yorick's hair by the campfire, and the way the yellow reflects off of the use of shadow. It's a sense of reflection. You know you're safe right now. But going back to that sunset thing, there's a sense of tension building as the panels become more and more purple and more blue and more dark. There's a sense of dread that's coming because, visually and, through our culture, night symbolizes fear. Like, look at Halloween. Everything's during the nighttime. And horror, usually, like Halloween. The movie Halloween. Valid. That's what I meant, not actual Halloween Day. So,
this is some of the fastest 250 pages I've ever read.
I concur. I will say I'm a slow reader. It takes me like for 20 to 22 pages, usually takes me half an hour to read it. I really like to take my time, especially on a monthly schedule. Like I like to take my time. I was surprised when I got through the first 5 issues. I was like, it's only been like an hour and a half for me. Like I could not believe, especially since the first issue is so long. It's like a 32-page issue. Like it flies by. The pacing is so good, and especially in the art, it's not that detailed, but it communicates everything it needs to visually.
Yeah, and I think panel layouts in this are really, really important because you have a lot of. I mean, like I was reminded a little bit of Watchmen here and there, where you have pretty simple panel layouts, but sometimes they're varied, and you have a lot of like things stacked on top of each other to convey what like cutting what like cutting back and forth from different shots would do, or like zooming in on a person's face to convey emotion, that kind of thing. There's a whole lot of that going on, and you'll notice that there's not a single narration box in this entire thing. We don't like all we get is occasionally a timestamp or something telling us where we are, and I think deliberately that's never put in a text box because it doesn't want you to feel like you're ever getting out of the visual space. The biggest problem with the way people talk about things like this is that they tend to give all the credit to the writer, and we don't think enough about the artist. Guerra is telling 50% of the story. If you take him out, and that's why I agree with you that this would be a different thing, I think, if it was done in prose. If you take him out, it's like taking away 50% of the population. It's just not the same thing, and all of the storytelling is visual. All of it. This is a wonderful case of you could not just give me the dialogue and I understand this story. You got that moment where I'm not real familiar with characters' names yet. You've got they jump out of the train, and you've got the one girl that's just fine, but I think 355 is the other one. She hits her head on a rock, and there's this big full-page reveal where that's happened. Nobody's got to explain it. We don't even have the other girl yell her name or anything. We just see it.
Yeah, I think Guerra's use of splash pages is perfect. Like when it's revealed that what is your name, Amazon? Hero, and that is a warranted use of a full-page spread.
It is, and it never feels gimmicky, right? It doesn't feel like this is the plot twist, y'all.
What it's doing is it's giving you big information, and it's giving you visually the space to soak it in, to take it in without having to just because when you're doing this, it is one panel, then you're going to the next panel, then you're going to the next panel, then you're going to the next panel, and then you go like this, and then go. With a full-page spread, you're looking at it, and then you have to turn it, you kind of have to turn your head, turn the book to look at something, so you're wanting to look at that page more and take in what is being communicated. I think it's expertly used. Guerra...
It tends to stop you. It either stops you on where you don't want to turn to the next page, or it stops you when you turn over and you don't even want to know what's going to happen next yet because you're trying to process what you just saw. That's the power of this medium, where if you use page turns just in general, but also full-page spreads, if you use them to the greatest effect you can, that's when you have this unpredictable nature with this medium that you don't have in anything else.
Right. Also, big kudos to Guerra. How many people does he have to draw in this book? And they all look different. They all look different.
And really expressive. Like, you were talking about how it's not the most detailed art in the world, but the faces are very expressive. Like, it's not a photorealistic thing, but everybody... But there's never a place where anybody's face looks, like, strange or screwed up, or, like, it's an expression that I don't know. Like, what's really nice is you've got people where when you look at their face, you know what they're feeling. And, again, I don't need narration by... When I read a thing like this and I go back to... And I don't mean to say that like superhero comics are never done in this sophisticated of an age. By and large, when you look at like mainstream DC and Marvel comics, you get a lot of issues where you get the sense that the book doesn't trust the artwork.
Right.
To really tell the story, so it's got to belabor it. It's got to make sure that you know what you're looking at. We don't do that as much now as we used to. We still do it to a degree, and this doesn't bother with it. This thinks it's a movie. Like nobody's told this it's a comic book. And I mean what I mean is it understands it's a comic book. I don't mean that. The panel layouts are really deliberate, but I'm just saying that like. You forget you're reading a comic book. All of a sudden, all those other senses that would be employed if I was watching a movie are there in my brain.
I think Vaughn really likes the style too, because it is very expressive, and like people's faces just work very well in this medium. And as you're saying, it doesn't need to be realistic. But if you look at stuff like Saga with Fiona Staples and Paper Girls with Cliff Chiang, he kind of goes back to that. And he always has a good choice of artist, and maybe it's because I've read Cliff Chiang and Pia Guerra have very similar art styles. This also reminded me of Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman in the sense that it had no caption boxes at all. I didn't even think about it until you said it. I had no clue there was no caption boxes. Dialogue, the inner monologue stuff, and that's great.
Yeah, it's just natural. You don't think about it.
Right. I want to talk about the dialogue because the dialogue manages to be funny, dramatic, and both at the same time. There's a great dialogue exchange when they're sitting at the Washington Monument, and he's talking with this anonymous woman, and I think they gave her name, but before you know her name, they're just talking about, and she says something like, "The Rolling Stones are dead." And she starts talking.
That was one of my favorite exchanges. Yeah.
And then there's like this. It's this emotional and like wow, the scale of this is finally starting to sink in when she says, and then instead of like lingering on just kind of the sadness ball, which would be a perfectly warranted thing to do, Vaughn inserts such good wordplay in here at the same time. Like he's like, but in one day we lost Dylan, Bowie, the rest of the Beatles. All of the Eels, The Who, Them Too, U2, Radiohead, Tom Petty, Tom Waits, Neil Young, the mother effing D, everyone. Like that's great wordplay, and it made me crack up, but I was also still feeling something. And it's a great.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's poetry, but it's not poetry.
Yeah.
When you think of lines like that, it's easy, and you got to take this on case by case. There's no good formula for this, Connor. Where you take lines like that and you look at it and it's like nobody in the moment would be that clever, and then you think, well, wait a minute, the way that is a call and response thing. It's going back and forth. It's not one person that came up with all that. And so what it turns into and what makes it natural, even though it's super clever writing, it's super clever, as you called it, wordplay. What you end up with is what's the word I'm looking for? It's like when what do you call it when you say a word and then I try to think, then I say the first thing that comes to my mind.
Word association.
Thank you. It's word association. That's what it is. So what he just wrote was word association. Yeah. So he was able to make something that sounds incredibly poetic, but it's really natural. Like that totally could have happened.
Yeah, and there's so much dialogue in here that I really like, and especially in the second half. I guess I'll go into this right now. I found the unmanned story arc to be just kind of fine, and then I found the Cycles storyline to be amazing. Of course, the unmanned sans the first issue, everything else. It was fine. I felt there was a distinct lack of focus. We're in New York, now we're going to, we're in Boston, now we're going to go to DC, and now we're going back to Boston. And
no, you're right. There's a distinct sense of forward momentum in that second half that you don't have as much in the first half. But it didn't jar me at all. I mean, like, I didn't even really think about it. I didn't really even split it up like that. I mean, it is split up that way. I'm just saying, think about the fact that it is split up that way, because I just felt like it had a lot of juggling to do in establishing where certain characters are and setting them up in the first place. And also, I would make the case, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I have a tendency sometimes to do that, where maybe that's on purpose to give you a feeling of what living in the world right then. It is chaotic.
It is.
So you've got a storytelling that is slightly more chaotic, but I feel like it still knows where it's going. It's still got that command of narrative.
Yeah, but to me, it's like what really drove me in that first issue was the dialogue, and I always wanted to listen to what these people were saying, because here's the thing: you can make a great premise.
It remains dialogue-driven throughout, though, yeah?
These characters are interesting. I like these characters. And it's like, there's a couple stuff in the first half that I didn't really care for. I felt that Ampersand was just the convenient monkey. Oh, we need him to jump out a window so when they get out, then the people can come in and burn down the lab. So then that felt a little, Ampersand.
Well, and doesn't that choice seem really counterintuitive for this material? And you got to wonder what the end game is with it, because it starts to, the more I read it make me feel totally confident in it. Where I'm like, this does not seem like the sort of thing where you'd have a pet monkey. This story has these weird, absurd quirks in it, but then it's this incredibly serious and in many points very disturbing kind of story. You could make the case, well, it's in comic book form because it wants to be able to get away with things like Andy's got a pet monkey. That sort of thing. But like as it goes along, even that stops being funny and cute for some reason. I don't know what that. But I think it's because he's so much part of the mystery that suddenly you're like, oh, okay, the monkey's there because we're wondering how in the world the monkey could be there.
Right, and you know what? You are right. It does become more confident in itself. That's why I think like Ampersand was less annoying to me in the second half, because I do felt like, especially in the second story arc, they get on a train, they have a set place they're getting to go, and then they get thrown off, and you're still in your mind thinking, man, I want him to get to X. And
you're also primarily following those characters at that point, where you've been jumping around a whole lot before that.
Yeah.
Between subplots, so there's that. Like, by the time you get there, you sort of feel like, because it's very clear from the very beginning that this story is supposed to be about this guy in this world of women where there aren't any other guys. So once we get back to him, I think maybe what you're experiencing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like maybe what you're experiencing, Conner, is this frustration of I know I'm still in setup territory. I'm supposed to be following this guy. When do we get back to this guy? That's what the story's supposed to be about.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, that is true, but to me, I don't know. So, I mean, I do know. I don't know why I said I didn't. So, there's like a point where he's like, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. He's like, okay, that makes sense. Then he runs into this superfluous, supermodel, garbage truck driver.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure this is all set up, but it didn't really go anywhere except for a cute little, where'd you get that truck? I got it from some supermodel. And it's like, I know that, and so...
And a little bit of like world building detail stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like we have to do something with these bodies. That's a tough thing to juggle, right? Where it's like you want everything. You want all those details to reveal things about your protagonist. You want every and this is a very tightly written thing. You want, and so like you're expecting those standards because it feels like it's living up to them for the most part. Where you want all of the elements that he's introducing to feel necessary, to feel like they've got to be there. But at the same time, he's doing this very large scope story where you want to know things like, what do you do with the bodies? You know, you got to fit that stuff in there somewhere, and so it's difficult to make that organic. I think it does a fairly decent job with that.
I mean, it is a lot of things to juggle. It does feel like in that juggle, the focus gets a little lost. Like, okay, now I'm going to go Washington D.C. Now I'm going to go to New York again, and we got to look around New York for my sister. And now we got to go to California.
Could I not make the argument to you, Conner, though, that that's this character? Like, he doesn't have a sense of direction yet. and he starts to find one more as he moves along. But this is a guy who his priorities are out of whack. He's well, to a degree. Now, I should also mention, because I think the way we've been talking about him, we've been throwing him under the bus a little bit. I think he's a very likable protagonist.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You like this guy. He doesn't want to sleep with all the chicks he can because he wants to go to Australia, and that was the one.
Yeah, and at the same time, speaking as a heterosexual male myself, I also don't completely condemn him when he makes out with the chick at the village.
It felt natural because you bought their attraction, because they have they have a mutual understanding of culture. Like, there's an Outsiders reference that was genius. Like, they referenced the Outsiders book, and it's like, you know what, I could have just as easily not understood that, but Yorick would have understood that. And to have, like, to connect with someone like that in a world where you haven't in months, it's completely understandable that their attraction is bought.
Well, we're dealing with natural instinct versus reason, and we are playing with that gender stuff. It's no surprise to me that it's no accident that he threw them in, like, the most romantic setting possible.
Yeah.
But like they're standing there in the fall with the leaves, like they're in, like, this farmstead. They got the leaves coming up behind, like it would be very difficult for anyone in either position, if they were attracted to each other, to not feel something in that scene.
And it does feel interesting. It's like, again, I love the stuff with them in the village.
I thought that was, like I said, that's my favorite segment. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I didn't call what the big reveal was going to be. I don't know if you did, about where they came from, and the ladies that were from a penitentiary nearby, and I thought that was really believable. They just let them go.
Yeah.
Because they're not, they were, you know, pretty much nonviolent. What are they going to? There were a couple murderers, but it's been a long time. What are they going to? How are they going to keep them there? That was the place where I said, this guy knows how to give every single character, no matter how much panel time they have, their own voice and make them completely realized. The old lady there, who was like, well, yeah, this Uric guy's an impulsive twit, but he doesn't deserve to die. And she murdered her husband and for a long time ago, and like, she has this very specific sense of justice.
Yeah.
And who deserves it, who doesn't, and I love that section because all those women came completely alive.
And one of those things is, like, I loved the idea of what is justice in a new world. Like, what does that look like? And so.
Well, we've got a no man's land.
Yeah, I was just quite literally a no man's land. So,
yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny too because I was agreeing with you earlier when you were like, I don't usually like post-apocalyptic. I don't either, except no man's land is my favorite thing. and while I'm reading this, I'm finding myself I think maybe satiating that same kind of thing that I loved about No Man's Land. There is a certain sort of post-apocalyptic I guess I really jones for.
Yeah. What was I saying?
Sorry.
No worries. It was. Oh yeah. So what is justice in this thing?
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, like, doesn't somebody say? Doesn't Yorick say, like, something about a clean slate? Like, you have a clean slate, and then now he's like, you're murderers. You need to serve the rest of your time, and that's again where he's book smart, and he has those impulses from and he's also a man, and that's again another male-dominated aspect of our thing is the justice system. So that's such a fascinating for him, such a fascinating contradiction for him to go to.
Well, he's got all these places where sometimes he seems to have a pretty good understanding of the complexities of, you know, the genders, and then other places he seems really close-minded, or not close-minded, but like there's just a concept that he's never figured. Not just the genders, but other things. There's that moment where he doesn't know the difference between a nationality and an ethnicity.
Yeah, but he knows what an ampersand is. I didn't know what an ampersand was. I'm like,
oh, that's hilarious.
That's what you call that thing.
So I know we're jumping around, but since you said ampersand again, there's a thing I meant to mention earlier that I've got to bring up now, and that is we were talking about the quirkiness of you've got a monkey in this book, running around with this guy, and I mean he's naive enough to think that like I've got this ring, this magic ring, so like he has this very like Disney Aladdin way of looking at things, I think, and he's got a monkey. I'm just throwing that out there. I just thought of that. Anyway, so he's
when he wears a fez, we know the parallel.
So you got this guy. See, I was thinking about the fez, and then I got distracted because I was like, that monkey wears a fez. There's this thing that I got distracted by while I was reading this, and I assume it's going to pay off because you were talking about names earlier and how we've got names that reflect people's personalities. We also talk about the names and how they affect the growth and evolution of personality because there's that talk about how he and his sister were named after Shakespearean characters and how they're weird names, but they were prophetic and they've grown into them. This is the thing that I've always been fascinated by is how much of your name is part of your identity, and it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. It's like do you grow up and it turns out to describe you, or do you turn it into that because that's the name you were given? And we've got that question here. So he's being very deliberate with all of those things. Okay, this monkey's name is ampersand. Ampersand is an and. So the question is Uric and what?
Right, that's good.
There's some on the other side of that monkey. What is it? And the question is it who he ultimately ends up with? Is it like does it have something to do with cracking the code of the what is it? Now anybody that's finished this already knows if it's anything. But I'm just saying we called the monkey ampersand. There's something on the other side of that.
Right. There's also go way back to the beginning again.
Yeah.
When so it's some great setup, some great foreshadowing when he's talking about the birth of Elvis. But
and the twin thing, yeah.
And now being a twin,
you'd have a unique perspective on that.
I'm just curious, and this is also kind of going with that name association. It's like, I'm a twin. We are genetic clones of one another, and that them being twins, being a genetic clone, that sets up Dr. Man's subplot of cloning people. But what happens is now being a twin, are we going to be the same person, or are we going to grow to be different individuals, but we have the same genetic code? And so that's an interesting thing. Is like when
do you maybe even force trying to go in different directions because you don't want to be the same person?
Right.
What exactly is it that causes that?
Yeah, I was kind of fascinated by it, and it also kind of starts a bit of a religious theme, because at first I was a little frustrated that the character was just a little too neutral, but as it grew on, I was very happy with his neutrality, because what happens is
talking about Yorick.
Yeah, Yorick. So what he does is he talks about Gladys gave birth to the king, God, so to speak, of rock and roll. And so what happens is now he's kind of king. There is no other person who's supposed to be the king. And when he's in this village, he says that he's like, as he quotes, a recovering Catholic.
Yeah.
And again, there's that uncertainty of what am I? Am I going to grow to be that Catholic that I was kind of born into, or what is that? And there's and he's like curious, is God real? Because why am I still alive? And there's that.
I always get frustrated with the Destiny question. I'm such a free will guy. Sorry, what's that?
You and me both. I hate. This is your destiny. Shut up, Sage. This is the characters.
Yeah, I always get frustrated with it, and it somehow or rather always seems to kind of signify the mortality and smallness of human beings when you get in an impossible situation like this and you look at the odds. It's impossible for people not to at least have the fleeting thought, if nothing else, of why me?
Yeah, And
I think that's absolutely fascinating because looking at a thing like this, like a fly on a wall, it's really easy for me to say, well, you just got lucky, dude.
Yeah.
Like there was no choice that was made. There's no destiny. It's simply it's an astronomical, kind of thing. But it had to be somebody. If it's anybody, when we ultimately find out what the real reasoning is behind it, but it's so difficult for us to grasp the idea that things would happen for no reason because it makes us feel insignificant. And I think that's the reason that when people get in, even people that aren't religious at all sometimes, I'm not speaking for everybody, but people who have, I'm working on the Constantine rewind right now, and this is a thing that happens in that movie, where you got John Constantine, who absolutely hates, detests the system, and is really anti-God and the way God works. But when he gets to his lowest place, he prays to God.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, that they find themselves doing that.
I think it's fascinating.
I'm sorry, that was a tantrum.
Absolutely no. I think it fits fine. One thing though is I like that it never feels like Vaughn is saying this is his destiny. It's Yorick saying, "Is this meant to be?" And I love that because
every time I think Vaughn's saying anything, I start to question it.
Right, because Vaughn has such an objective. He's not inserting himself into the story, and I loved that.
And even if he is, you can't tell where it's happening.
Exactly. Also, the cliffhangers, I couldn't have imagined reading this from month to month. Like, I got to the end of an issue, and I see the cover for the next issue, and I'm like, oh, that was the end of an issue? Well, I'm glad I can read it now, because I couldn't have read this month to month. The anticipation would have killed me.
That's why I said when I got to the end of this, I was like, I don't want to wait for Conner. I want to keep reading this. I don't want to stop. At first, we were reading this for a video, and I was really busy today. And at first, it was like, oh man, I got all these pages to read. And once I got into it, I just couldn't quit. It stopped being work. And we should talk about the cliffhanger, of course, getting us into the next volume, which we'll review sometime in the near future. And so there are men in space. I like the way Vaughn seeds that, and I called it real early on, where somebody's like, there's a Russian lady who's like, there's men in space. They're coming. They're gonna land on they're coming, and nobody's paying any attention to her because she barely speaks English, and she's like, there's men in space, and they're coming, and they're gonna land, and then nobody's paying attention. And she shows up in 2 or 3 times, and after a while, it becomes almost a joke. And she's isn't she somewhere close to the train at some point?
When they're getting on the train, they're taking her off the train.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot there was a word balloon. It felt like it was an extraneous noise that I was hearing in my head. Maybe that just makes me schizophrenic, but it was.
Oh. Okay.
Well, I mean, the thing reads so cinematically and it moves at such a pace and everything that it's almost like, oh yeah, I completely forgot a couple pages ago they were setting that up again. But you know what? It's I really like that insertion into it. I really kind of like how she was kind of seated in there. I didn't really call it. That's another thing about cliffhangers. You know what? I'm not going to go in there. Twist endings. I'm not going to go there. But you say what you were going to say.
Oh no, nothing at all. I was just enjoying being pointed at constantly.
I am a very naive viewer. If there's a twist ending, I'm not going to call it.
Whoa! That would make you instantly like a lot of things more than other people,
okay.
I bet.
Did you see M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit that came out a couple months back?
No, because it's Shyamalan, and I'm not going to see another one of his movies until somebody just
I didn't know there was a twist ending going in there because M. Night Shyamalan doesn't make a.
It's Shyamalan.
Yeah, but here's the thing: he didn't make a cameo in his own movie. So it's so he's not gonna have a twist ending, okay? And then it's the grandparents are always saying, "Don't go in the basement. There's mold down there." I'm like, "Oh, okay," but there's also this mystery being built up of what happened. My grandparents and my mom haven't talked to each other since she left. What happened? And so it's that's kind of built up what happens. Whatever's in the basement, that's what's going to happen. And the big twist is something completely different that was also seeded. And I went, oh, got me. I am such an idiot. Oh, man, they got me. That was a good twist. And I go online and everyone's like, oh, I called that immediately. And I'm like, oh. And then there's Crimson Peak that just came out. There's a bit of a twist ending, and I'm sitting next to.
Don't tell me about that. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to tell you, but a bit of a twist comes, and I went, oh, I didn't see that coming. And then my brother turns to me and he goes, called it. And I was like, so when I'm reading this and they're talking about men in space, I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably going to pay off sometime, but it's not going to be the way I think it's going to be. And then it's like, bam, there's a men in space. I went, oh. I'm so easily, like, I just, whatever the story is feeding me, I will just eat it until I'm proven otherwise. I'm a naive viewer.
Yes, well, and I think the reason that I was kind of looking for it is the thing. Because, well, and part of it, too, is I have read this before. I just didn't remember much back. It's been a really long time. But, so when I got to that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember Men in Space. But I was kind of looking for it because when you have a premise like this, you immediately start wondering if the status quo really is what you're told it is. I mean, you get something like I Am Legend. He's supposed to be the last man on Earth, but in the third act, there's a very, I guess maybe second act, they introduce somebody else. So which I always thought was a misstep, but whatever. When you have a premise like that, you always have to kind of wonder if it's really the way it's being sold, or if there's going to be this big surprise reveal where there's somebody else around. And the only possible place there could be men would be on a space station. And you have to like because the thing is, he's dealing with like anything I could think of where I'm like, I hope he talks about this. He talks about it.
Yeah.
Like, nearly everything. I mean, he just covers every gambit of the culture. So every part of the gambit of the culture. So I find myself thinking about space.
Yeah. Because
it's like, well, we know there's an international space station. There have to be men on it.
Right.
Almost certainly there are men on it. I doubt there would ever be a time there were only women. I kind of doubt there would be a time there were only men too at this point. Like I think there's always kind of a mix of different kinds of people up there. So anyway, That's it. Okay, so we're clear in about an hour. So why don't we throw out some final thoughts, and then we will review the second volume as soon as we can, because I want to just turn this off and go read. Were there any other criticisms? Because of course we've kind of just been lavishing praise on this thing primarily.
I think it's a little meandering in the first half, and Yorick's hair color changes from black to brown a couple of times throughout a couple issues. I thought his hair was brown. I do think. So at the end of in the second issue of Cycles, the story arc Cycles, it's brought up that there's a twist about this village. And then in the third issue, we find out what it is. And in the fourth issue, Sonia, what's her name? Not Sonia. Is it Sonia? The girl he makes out with, she dies. And it's like, I thought it all happened a little too fast. I thought her just kind of spilling her guts, like, oh, we are in a penitentiary. I thought, like, I mean, it's a great reveal and everything. I thought it happened a little too fast.
Maybe it was right. Do you think it could have used another issue, or?
Honestly, I just liked being there so much. I wouldn't have minded being there longer. So.
Yeah. Well, because, and I think maybe the deal was Vaughn didn't want him to get to be in paradise too long, right. But the sister shows up pretty quick. My thing right now is. The only thing I can think of to really complain about right now, besides a couple minor things we talked about earlier, is I do think it's maybe a little bit convenient that out of everybody on the planet, the one guy that survives, sister, ends up being second in command of the Amazons.
I didn't think she was second in command.
Well, it seems like she's kind of taken over by the end of this, yeah?
Well... Oh, I guess you're right. I don't know, because when we first meet Hero...
She's definitely in the up and up on that, right? I mean, like maybe they don't even have a chain of command, but I mean, they've got a leader, and she's, like...
Talking a lot.
Well, and I mean, like, she's being used as, like, the lead hench girl to go do things a lot. I saw it as second in command. Even if it's not, though, I'm just saying that it seems maybe a little bit so... Like he's... In order to create this scope, we've had to create a couple of conveniences for our one man to have important people in his life that are important to everybody else also. Like his mother works at the White House, his sister ended up in Amazon. If there were very few women left also, I might buy it a little bit more, but every woman on the planet's still alive mostly, so like that seemed convenient to me.
Yeah. I like the part where Dr. Mann runs into the village and says, it's 3:55, and someone says, no, it's 7:30.
No, it's 7.
That was great. And
this is one of those. Sorry,
3:55 or 3:55, and that confirmed it. So, yeah.
This is one of those books. It's 3:50. That reminds me of that early Angel episode where it's like, give me a steak. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Not that kind of steak. But this is one of those books where this will be my final thought. Where it is really hard for me not to want to read into just everything because it's so ultra detailed and everything seems to kind of mean something. It's plotted that tightly and it's really nuanced. So I look at something like 355 and I'm like, that number's gotta mean something. And then I start noodling it and I'm like, well, it's 10 days less than the number of days in a year, and I don't know if that means anything. But then it's just like especially people's names, really hard for me not to read into.
It is, yeah. This story is so fully, and it is like, I can't somebody just how is somebody so sure of this world and so confident in this so early on? It's great. I really like this, especially the second half and the first issue. I am very excited to read the next issue, next trade.
The next trade, yeah. Well, Conner and I will come back sometime in the very near future to review Y the Last Man Volume 2, and we're not going to have months in between these. We're going to make sure and get back and do these regularly if you're around to do them, Conner, because I have been putting this off forever, and now I refuse to let there be very much time in between these because I'm very immersed in this world now, and I really want to see where things go.
I would love to be back. So.
Well, I will, Conner. I would love to continue these with you. So, come back. Yeah, good job. You're hired. Yeah. Everybody, hope you enjoyed the Comic Vault. Thanks a lot for watching. If you would ever like to send anything for us to review in the Vault, and I'll do my level best for it not to take 2 or 3 years, feel free to send things to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 4733, Overland Park, Kansas 66204. If you are ever in the Kansas City area, check out Elite Comics in Overland Park. They are fantastic. They help us out a lot with the show. We sure appreciate them. And make sure to check out Conner Nielsen's YouTube channel for more awesome videos over there and to see all of his epic work from Who Reviews the Reviewers, if you've not seen all those videos yet. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan.
And I am Conner Nielsen.
Happy reading.